I was living alone in a small rental house just outside town when all of this happened. It was a one-story place at the end of a short, dead-end road. There were only 5 houses on the street, and at night it was usually very quiet. I worked from home doing freelance graphic design, so most days I didn't leave unless I needed groceries. I didn't get visitors often, and my friends always texted before coming over. That's exactly why the first knock stood out. It was around 8:45 at night on a Thursday. I was sitting in the living room watching TV when I suddenly heard 4 firm knocks on the front door. I muted the TV and sat still for a moment, thinking maybe I imagined it. Then, a few seconds later, there were 2 more knocks. I got up and walked toward the door. There's a small peephole in the center of it. When I looked through, I saw a man standing on my porch, holding a medium-sized cardboard box. He was wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He looked completely normal, probably in his mid-30s. I opened the door but kept the chain on. He immediately said he had a delivery that required a signature and read a name from a small handheld device. It wasn't my name. It wasn't even close. I told him he had the wrong address. He looked down at the box, then at his device, then back at me. Then he read the address out loud. It was my exact address. I told him no. One by that name lived there. He stared at me for a second longer than necessary, then said he must have been given the wrong information and that he would take it back to the truck. I watched him walk down my driveway. I expected to see a delivery van, or at least a car parked somewhere nearby. But there was nothing. He walked past my mailbox and turned the corner at the end of the street. I never saw where he went. I shut the door and locked it, telling myself it was probably just a small company delivery, or maybe a contractor without a marked vehicle. The next night, at almost the exact same time, there were 3 knocks again. This time, I didn't open the door right away. I went straight to the peephole. It was the same man, wearing the same jacket and holding the same box. I didn't open the door. I just spoke through it and told him he had already come by and that no one with that name lived there. He didn't respond immediately. Then he said he just needed a signature and that the system showed the package had to be delivered that night. I told him I wasn't signing for someone I didn't know. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Okay," and stepped back from the door. But instead of leaving, he stood at the edge of the porch, staring at the house. Slowly, he turned his head toward my front windows, then toward the side of the house, and then back at the door. After about 15 seconds, he finally walked down the driveway. Again, there was no vehicle. That's when it started to feel wrong. On the 3rd night, there was no knock. I actually felt relieved. I thought maybe he had figured out the mistake. I even joked to myself about how weird it would have been if he showed up again. But on the 4th night, around 9 p.m., I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard 4 knocks. This time, it wasn't the front door. It was coming from the side of the house, near the dining room window. I slowly walked into the dining room and looked toward the window. But no one was there. Then, suddenly, there were 4 more knocks at the front door. I went to the peephole again. It was him, but this time, he wasn't holding a box. His hands were completely empty. I didn't say anything. He knocked again. Then he stepped back and looked directly at the peephole. I immediately stepped away from the door so he couldn't see any movement and stayed completely silent. After about 30 seconds, he turned and walked away. I waited 5 full minutes before checking the windows. I walked around the house with all the lights off, looking through the blinds. That's when I saw him. He was standing across the street near the tree line, just staring at my house. After about a minute, he finally walked off into the darkness. I went back and locked every window and door again, even though they were already locked. The next day, I called the local police non-emergency line and explained everything that had been happening. The officer I spoke to said it sounded like someone trying to verify occupancy. He explained that burglars sometimes knock to see if someone answers, before breaking in later. He told me to install cameras if I could, and to call 911 if the man came back. That night, I turned off all the front lights and stayed in my bedroom. At 8:45, right on time, there were 4 knocks. I didn't respond. A few seconds later, there were 4 more knocks. Then silence. I waited about a minute. Then I heard something else. A soft thud at the back of the house. Then another. It sounded like someone was testing the back door. I grabbed my phone and quietly walked into the hallway. I could hear the back doorknob turning slowly, stopping, then turning again. I immediately called 911 and whispered that someone was trying to break into my house. While I was still on the phone, the knocking started again at the front door. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way. Meanwhile, the back doorknob kept turning. That's when I realized there was more than one person. Then I heard the sound of metal lightly scraping against the door frame. After about 30 seconds, everything suddenly stopped. It became completely silent. Even then, I stayed on the phone until the police arrived. When they searched outside, they found fresh pry marks on the back door near the handle. The officer told me that if I hadn't been home, the door likely would have been forced open. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. The next night, I stayed at my brother's apartment across town. I didn't post anything online or tell anyone I wasn't home. I just left quietly. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. It was my neighbor from 2 houses down. She said there was someone standing on my porch, knocking repeatedly, and that he had been there for at least 5 minutes. She asked if I was home. I told her no, and asked if he had a vehicle. She said she didn't see one. I told her to call the police. Officers arrived and questioned him. Later that night, an officer called me and said the man claimed he was trying to deliver a package, but had misplaced it. He had no company ID and no marked vehicle. They warned him to stay away from the property. 2 days later, police arrested him in a nearby neighborhood after he was caught attempting to break into another house where the owner was out of town. Inside his car, they found multiple empty cardboard boxes and a small handheld scanner that wasn't connected to any real delivery company. During questioning, he admitted everything. He said he would knock with a fake package first. If someone answered, he would leave and mark the house as occupied. If no one answered after multiple attempts, he would come back later and force entry. He even said that sometimes he would return several nights in a row to watch patterns. If lights were on one night and off the next, he assumed the house was empty. Hearing that made me realize how close I was to not being home that first week. If I had ignored the door even once, he probably would have come back later expecting no one inside. I moved out of that house 3 months later when my lease ended. Even now, I never answer the door at night unless I know exactly who's coming over. If someone knocks unexpectedly, I stay quiet and check cameras first. And if anyone ever shows up with a package that has my address, but not my name, I don't even go near the door anymore.